Part 27. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 261. Okay, it's good that you have this awareness. Search on Google and read Ruger actually didn't get angry, but breathed a sigh of relief. On the battlefield, swords are silent. Everyone is their own master, so there is no need to complain. I wanted to give you an extra chance for the sake of my old friendship, but it was you who didn't use it, not me who didn't give it. This way, I feel at ease. Goodbye. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. With that said, Lugger reached out and pulled the firing lever. Show mercy. Someone's voice, what the hell? Why do people in Rogtown always behave this way? As a sound was projected remotely by magic, a group of people suddenly appeared on the east wall of Rogtown. Most of them are familiar faces from the Paladin Order, even the Amazon female warrior named Natasha. Now it seems that that person should be Austin's partner, the Knight. Seeing these people suddenly appear, Lugger instantly understood that they were just like the werewolf Joshua before, and had been watching the show nearby. As for why it only appeared now, it was probably due to Lugger's words when he persuaded the female necromancer to surrender. Because even though the somewhat distorted voice was projected remotely by magic in order to let Luge hear it earlier, Luge still recognized the identity of the speaker. That was the current leader of Rogtown, the highest monk of the Sisterhood of the Blind Eye, and the grandmother of the necromancer Jelaya, who was about to be killed by Rog, Akara. However, although the female monk was surrounded by all the holy knights in the center and looked at Luge with a pleading and somewhat worried look, Luge's eyes only glanced at her and then moved to the side. Because the person standing on her right hand supporting her was the one who had just been killed by Lugger before, the leader of the Paladin Order, the Paladin Commander, Austin. Did you see a ghost? Lugger murmured in his heart. It's not unusual for the concept of resurrection to exist in the magical world. But this guy was obviously killed by me, but he was still recognized by the system and became my point. How can he be resurrected under such circumstances? Could this be the special treatment for the Hell Demon God's chosen champion? Ruger had already stood up from the gunner's position and leaned half of his body out of the top hatch. It can be regarded as a response to Akara's request in this way. He was staring at Austin and wondering, while the resurrected paladin captain over there looked like he was determined to be a human crutch, concentrating on supporting Akala. It seems that the only value of his existence is to serve as a crutch for Akala. Could it be that it's a puppet? Lugger murmured inwardly. Perhaps sensing the change in Lugger's gaze, the paladin actually turned his head and looked at him, and then looked away again. Just one glance was enough for Lugger to confirm that that guy was Austin himself. Even if he now looks like a gentle and considerate good grandson, the arrogance, deadness, coldness in his eyes, as well as the deep-seated hatred for Lugger, cannot be faked. But because of this glance, Lugger was a little more relieved about his resurrection. Hatred is good. Lugger likes to see his enemies hate him. If the enemy hates you, it means that you have hurt the enemy, hit him hard, and hit him so hard that he can no longer bear the pain. This is a good sign. A champion chosen by the Hell Demon God actually hated himself so much. Lugger immediately guessed that he must have suffered a huge loss when he died at his hands. Even his backstage devil couldn't make up for this loss. Otherwise, the hatred in his eyes when he looked at her wouldn't be so, instead it should be ridicule and provocation. That's the feeling of what can you do to me? So, Lugger looked at him and grinned. However, before the Holy Knight Captain, who was looking at him from the corner of his eye, could get angry at his ridicule, Lugger turned to look at the female monk on his left. Lord Akara, long time no see. Long time no see, Mr. Liu. Thank you for your mercy. With that said, the 70-year-old female monk bowed to Lugger very elegantly. My humble grandson is troubled and troubled by love. Please bear with me, Mr. Liu. Good guy, for the sake of your granddaughter, You have set your attitude low enough. Luodu muttered to himself, but he didn't know that countless people around him, including Anya in his car, were frightened by Akara's polite response to Luodu. Although everyone knows that Ruger is powerful, Andariel is still powerful, and I have never seen Akara treat the monster leader with such courtesy. Moreover, Akara's tone, both inside and outside of his words, was that he treated Luger as an equal. In the entire Rog town, the only one who could make her speak like this was the recently deceased Kasha, right? This is the only old man who has truly lived since before the world was broken 50 years ago. The second eldest person in the town is Akara's personal guard, Roger Frey, who is standing on the left side of Akara, supporting the old man with Austin. And she is only in her 40s this year. He is a typical person born after the catastrophe. Therefore, Akara's attitude toward Ruger as an equal was really shocking, confusing, and incomprehensible to the people around him. In fact, what is there that cannot be understood? Akara has already determined that Ruger has just emerged from the time gap 50 years ago, and his real age is only 3 or 5 years younger than her. She and Ruger's ex-girlfriend were close friends, so it is normal to talk to Ruger in this tone. Ruger also knows what Akara is thinking. So he naturally replied, "It's understandable. Young people, who hasn't been young before? Sarah. Anya. Members of the cult." What he said made everyone speechless. However, some people in the cult also discussed it privately. This guy, from what he said, isn't he also an old monster? What do you mean by also? Who are you talking about as an old monster? No, I mean, isn't he also someone who was born before the cataclysm? How is that possible? Looking at him, he's probably not even 30 years old. For so many years, he's been short of food and clothing in the apocalypse. Look at his face, is there any trace of frost? That's what I want to say, the man before slapped his thigh and explained in detail. He doesn't look like he's struggling to survive in the apocalypse at all. How do you think this should be explained? Has he never experienced the apocalypse? Or does he have a way to keep his youthful appearance? Has he never experienced the apocalypse? Could it be that he's hiding in some safe Lost One ruins and has only come out recently? I've heard from the Lost Ones that they seem to have a technology called sleep, which can keep people alive for hundreds of years if they're frozen. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 262. If he has a secret to keep his youthful appearance, it would be even simpler. Maybe he is already in his 70s or 80s, but he has made his appearance look like he is in his 20s. After hearing what the man said, the people around him who had been arguing with him before stopped talking. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. The other person pondered for a while and said unsurely, it seems that what he said makes some sense. What do you mean by a little? How about you give a reasonable explanation? Seeing that everyone else was silent, the man before immediately stood up to defend his theory. At the same time, similar conversations were being staged many times among the cult members. Akara might have heard a little, but Ruger certainly couldn't hear it. But he didn't care. Isn't it just being treated as an old popsicle? It's not the first time. Besides, doesn't Akara think of himself as an old popsicle in his heart? He acted as if it was his due, totally ignoring how others felt when hearing what he said just now. What does young people, who hasn't been young before? The Paladin Order regarded him as an old monster because of this sentence, but Sarah Anya knew that he was not. He said it as if he was very old. Is he not young anymore? The two of them complained in their hearts. But their moods were subtly different. Later, they all knew the origin story that Akara had made up for Ruger. Sarah really listened to it as a story. She had her own information channels and her own unique judgment of Ruger's origin. As for Anya, She actually listened to Akara's words as a story at first. Otherwise, anyone who suddenly had a grandpa who was only a few years older than himself when he was 20 years old would not be able to accept it. But after spending some time with Ruger, she really felt the warmth of family in him. Once emotions come up, they don't listen to the voice of reason. Slowly, at least emotionally, she has regarded Ruger as a relative. That is equivalent to implicitly agreeing with Akara's story. In short, it is really a bit subtle. Everyone was confused by Ruger's words. Although they were different, they all focused on him. Only one person, after hearing this conversation, did not care about the huge amount of information in it, but shouted loudly. "It is not your turn to decide my affairs. I will avenge Joshua today." Ruger realized as soon as he heard it that this little princess-like necromancer had a bad relationship with Akara. However, he was too lazy to ask about other people's family affairs. In his opinion, the little princess's affairs were just because her family members died, and only she and Akara were left alive, so she had a kind of survivor's guilt. This is because Akara is still there and is a big shot, so her resentment is mainly focused on this grandmother who has a very high status but can't even save her daughter, the female necromancer mother. If Akara had died long ago, or simply had nothing to do with the female necromancer's family, then the female necromancer would have hated herself mainly today. Because she hated herself, she hated the world, so she always wanted to die. It was also quite in line with the Gothic style of the necromancer's appearance. Giulia. Stop fooling around. The female necromancer hated others and herself in various ways, but Akara obviously valued this granddaughter very much. Seeing that she was actually planning to rush out of the Ferdinand turret area and rush towards Ruger with her body, the female monk immediately shouted. At the same time, the old man actually looked at Ruger with a pleading look on his face, and he almost asked him again in front of everyone. Parents in the world are so kind. Ruger looked at Akara's appearance and couldn't help sighing in his heart. Looking at Anya, who was still sitting in the cockpit in front of him, Ruger could more or less understand Akara's inner entanglement and helplessness. What kind of path this child can take and what kind of personality he becomes are closely related to his parents, but it is really not something that can be easily controlled. So, he did not return to the gunner's position, but quietly took out the G28 precision marksman rifle that he had not used for a long time. This thing has a small caliber and moderate power. It is enough to effectively kill Nephilim of the level of the necromancer, and it can avoid the vital parts under the control of the shooter, so that it is injured but not dead. This can be regarded as Luger giving Akara another face. However, before he took action, Giulia, who rushed towards him, gathered magic power first. The princess of Rogue Town raised her hands high, and unexpectedly condensed a light ball emitting a dark black magic aura. After accelerating forward twice, she immediately threw the light ball towards Luger like a long-range shot. She also shouted in response, "Death Decay." What? Luger was not calm when he heard the name of this move. He didn't have time to complain that this goth girl actually called out the name of the move in a middle school way, and was attracted by the name itself. Now he was no longer in a hurry to deal with the female undead. He raised the rifle in his hand and fired a full-power rifle bullet at the black light ball flying rapidly in the air. With a popping sound, the full metal jacket bullet directly penetrated the light ball, but it quickly disintegrated and rusted as if weathered, turning into a pile of flying ash. And the light ball itself was also triggered in advance by the kinetic energy of the bullet, and exploded directly in the air, covering the surrounding area of several meters into the black light Wumeng area. As a result, the weeds and wildflowers on this land quickly withered and blackened, and the surrounding environment also withered and dilapidated like a dead place. A gust of wind blew, blowing the grass outside the area into the dark withered area, and the wild grass that was lush before also withered quickly. Until the gust of wind blew, the remaining half of the grass lost the influence of external force and bounced back to its original position, which preserved the green of the grass roots that did not enter the area. This move, as its name says, will bring withering to eternal death. However, the strength of this move itself is not the key is that Ruger has heard of this move. Isn't this the signature skill of the great Lich Kel'Thuzad next door? Wait, what is the name of this female undead? Gialia. Gialia. Gialia Menethil? Kel'Thuzad's boss, the sister of the Lich King Arthas Menethil? The one who first became a conscious undead, the Forsaken, then was killed, then revived by the Holy Light, and finally became a light-forged undead? Now think about it, a sudden ice mage suddenly got sick, and after being rescued by the Holy Light, he not only could use the Holy Light, but also inexplicably became a necromancer. If this route is explained by the fate line of Gialia next door, wouldn't it be logical? Gialia here is not a serious illness, I'm afraid she was turned into an undead. She has become an undead, how can she not know the undead spell? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 263. Why didn't anyone find out that she was actually an undead? Ruger guessed that it was probably because of the Holy Light, which covered up or even neutralized the annoying features of the undead creatures. Google search reading. Thinking of this, Ruger couldn't help but glance at Sarah, who was also leaning out to check the situation, and wondered if he had come to the Dark World. How come there is a Blade Queen Sarah Kerrigan here, and a light-forged undead Kalia over there? Could this be the world of Heroes of the Storm, which is about to become popular? Forget it, it seems as impossible as making that game really popular. However, this is interesting. This female necromancer is not only named Kalia, but also has the signature skills of the Lich King's deputy, the Archlich. Could there be another Lich King waiting for him from somewhere here? Ruger couldn't help but look at Austin, who had resurrected from the dead, and wondered if it was him. The chosen champion of the cunning demon Belial is the Lich King created by the Burning Legion demon Kil'jaeden the Deceiver next door. There doesn't seem to be any conflict, right? Wait. A cunning demon and a demon deceiver, these two guys, don't they have some kind of connection? According to the setting that there is another self in the parallel world of the multiverse, these two guys, can't they be the parallel worlds of each other? If this is because of traveling to a world, will it be like the movie of Kung Fu Master Lee, where you can get the power of the other by killing the other, or will they directly merge into one person? Oh, a demon? Also, Belial was originally called the King of Lies, but now the title certified by the system is the Cunning Demon. Could it be because of this? For a while, Lugger's imagination was serious. It was not until the female undead backhanded another Kel'Thuzad signature skill Frost Meteor shot at him that Lugger came back to his senses and threw an offensive grenade at that thing. Offensive grenades are grenades used during an attack. Unlike defensive grenades that can be thrown out at will while hiding in a bunker, offensive grenades only have explosives but no fragments. Because if there are fragments in the grenade, it is easy to accidentally injure friendly forces in the attack, including yourself. So it is not an exaggeration to say that it is a small explosive ball that is convenient and quick to use. This thing kills by the shockwave of explosives, which is very suitable for attacking the opponent's bunkers, so it is reasonable to call it offensive in the era of trench warfare. And the reason why Ruger used it has nothing to do with its original purpose. He just used this thing as an interceptor missile to detonate the Frost Meteor in advance. What? Grenades are all delayed fuses, and there is no proximity fuse. How can it be used like this? That's right. Others definitely can't use it. But Ruger can. He threw an offensive grenade at the Frost Meteor, and his eyes were fixed on the flight trajectory of the grenade. When the two spheres intersected in the air, he snapped his fingers in the air with his right hand. At the same time, under the effect of his telekinetic skill tree, remote object movement skill, the flame ignited by the firing pin of the grenade was quickly transmitted to the detonator, directly causing the main explosive to explode. Boom! The blast wave of hundreds of grams of high explosives directly engulfed the frost meteor, so the frost meteor exploded before the blast wave of the explosives completely exploded. If the laws of physics did not allow it, I'm afraid that the blast wave would also be frozen into the frost magic energy of the frost meteor. After confirming that the opponent's move was resolved, Ruger didn't have time to wipe the sweat from his forehead, and hurriedly picked up the G28 again and shot at the female necromancer who was about to use the third move. No! Amid Akara's exclamation, a string of blood beads pierced the chest of the female necromancer who was running forward. She paused for a moment, and then she fell to the ground as if she had suddenly developed osteomalacia. Hurry, hurry, and save her! Seeing her granddaughter being shot down by Ruger, Akara had no time to say harsh words to Ruger, and hurriedly called the surrounding paladins to save her. Akara's behavior made Ruger frown. She did not rush to send troops to retaliate against Ruger, but first used her energy to save people, which showed that in her heart, the girl's life was indeed more important. This showed that she probably really thought that the necromancer was her relative. This kind of cherishing of blood relatives from the heart is difficult for others to imitate. Then, Akara is probably not a puppet directly controlled by the demon god, and she still has her own emotions. However, as the highest monk of the blind eye, her power system is between the Amazon warrior and the elemental mage, and she is also the strongest potion master in the entire rogue town. She herself is a master of the generation who can cure diseases and save people. But she cared so much about her granddaughter's life and death, but she didn't take action herself, but called on others to save her. This means that either she has lost her ability to move, or her actions are not free. Third, and what Ruger cares most about is that when she gave the order in a hurry, no one, whether it was the people of the Paladin Order or the Rogue Guards who nominally only obeyed her orders, took action. Some of those people subconsciously looked at Austin beside her, and most of them just stayed where they were. Even if those Rogue Guards had strange faces and expressions that seemed neither sad nor angry, they just stayed where they were and didn't move at all. After all these things, Ruger could only draw one conclusion. Akara and her rogue guards had been sidelined and even controlled by the Paladin Order. Now, they could only act as puppets, without any autonomy. Rogue Town had really changed. Ruger felt very uncomfortable watching the grief-stricken old woman staring at her granddaughter, whose life or death she didn't know, with a complicated expression. Is this the final result of Akara's support for the Paladin Order? Her most beloved relative fell in front of her, and she had the ability to save people, but she couldn't save them. She also had a title of commanding the world, but she couldn't command anyone. All this was just because she supported the Order and betrayed her team. Is it worth it? Perhaps even she couldn't stand the scene anymore. Sarah leaned over to Ruger's ear and whispered something, then turned over and jumped off the chariot, ran 2 steps on the grass, and disappeared into the green wasteland. Ruger was somewhat surprised by her sudden departure, but looking at the rogues on the wall, he seemed to understand a little. If even the rogues around Akara were like this, what kind of treatment would the other rogues in Rogue Town suffer? As the only senior rogue general who could still move freely, Sarah must take action. After understanding this, Ruger stopped thinking about it and turned to Akara and said, "Don't worry, my shot only knocked her out. Even if she is just an ordinary person, she can't die now." Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Aichiji. Chapter 264. Ruger's skill level of two-handed pistols has been raised to a very high level. Two-handed pistols mastery, 6 expert. After a little more practice, he can reach the master level. At that level, he can basically use a medium caliber sniper rifle to kill targets at a distance of 3 kilometers. At medium and short distances, he can even act as a human gun detector, and improve the shooting accuracy to a level infinitely close to the mechanical accuracy of the gun. At that time, he can really shoot people within 500 meters, and injure, stun, and kill people. But now, he is still a little short of the heat. Google searched Can. The reason why he dared to say that to Akara was entirely because the system did not show him the kill record. If there is no kill record, it naturally means that the female necromancer was not killed by his one shot. Hearing him say that Giulia is not dead, Akara's expression finally eased. She looked at Ruger for a long time with a complicated expression, and opened her mouth to say something, but it seemed as if something was stuck, and she took it back halfway. Ruger knew that she probably wanted to thank him, but she didn't dare to disobey the order of the person who controlled her. Alas! He sighed again in his heart, but Ruger turned his head to look at the 3 holy knights and one skeleton who had been hiding in the corner. "You, come here, carry this person back." Just now, Akara, the nominal mayor of Raj Town, gave an order, but no one took action. Now that Ruger, the actual enemy, gave an order, the 4 people didn't even blink, and ran towards Giulia. Looking at their expressions, not only did they not have the reluctance and grief of being ordered by the enemy, but they were relieved and relaxed. Seeing this situation, the faces of the Raj guards on the city wall became even more strange and complicated. Seeing them like that, Ruger wanted to say to them, especially to Akara, "This is called truth is only within the range of the cannon. Only those who control the guns are qualified to hold power. But, what's the point of saying this now?" For a moment, the field fell into a strange silence. A few hundred meters is not far. Running at full speed, the 4 people did not take long to reach the place where Giulia fainted. The 2 paladins had already used the healing aura halfway, and when they arrived at the female undead, they immediately released the aura. Giulia was infused with the healing aura of the 2 paladins, and soon she coughed lightly and gradually became alive. "My lord, she is really still alive." Several paladins turned their heads and said excitedly. However, the lord they turned to look at was not Akara on the wall, or their leader Austin, but Ruger on the bare assault gun. Seeing that they did not reply to their superiors but reported to Ruger in a flattering manner, Anya in the front row almost laughed out loud. But Ruger seemed to have expected their behavior. He just nodded calmly and asked them to carry the people back to Rog Town. Anyway, the gate of the east gate had been damaged by the magic Ferdinand, so they didn't have to go far. In fact, Ruger was not as calm as he looked. He was also curious about what these 4 brothers were thinking. Why did they suddenly betray and become his subordinates? But when they heard Ruger say that they should carry the people back to Rog Town, they still looked happy and went back happily. What is this? Stockholm Syndrome? Ruger laughed in his heart, but shook his head indifferently. Who cares about them? It's not important. I wonder if the 4 brothers over there will feel relieved or sad when they hear his comment. This may be a mystery forever. Seeing them go away, Ruger suddenly thought of something and patted the car body, saying to Anya, "Drive to Ferdinand." After arriving, he looked at the modified infantry vehicle that he had built and destroyed with his own hands with a complicated expression, and reached out to touch the gap in the turret armor. The next moment, a white light flashed, and the whole car disappeared directly in the light. After a moment, the white light dimmed, and only the body of the barbarian female warrior in the cockpit was left. "You, take her back too." Ruger called the 4 paladins not far ahead. Still no one dared to resist. On the wall that had been silent, Akara's complicated and incomprehensible voice sounded. "Is this your full metal alchemy?" Yes. Ruger looked at Akara with interest and nodded. Akara's face was very strange, and she still wanted to say something, but she didn't say it in the end. But unlike before, This time her silence no longer seemed like she didn't dare, but more like she didn't want to. She didn't dare to say it before because she was afraid of angering the person who controlled her by showing goodwill to Ruger. She didn't want to say it now, probably because she didn't want to help the person who controlled her to expose the secret of Ruger's full metal alchemy. After all, judging from the old Popsicle origin story that Akara helped Ruger to make up, it was not difficult for her to guess that the essence of Ruger's full metal alchemy was a set of dimensional pockets with a large capacity. Given Akara's age and experience, it's not too much to regard her as half a lost human. It's normal for her to guess it. After thinking this through, Ruger no longer wasted time and finally told the real owner his purpose again. I came here for two purposes this time. Take away a car and another person. Now that the car problem is solved, there is still half left. Minerva. Hand over Minerva intact, and I will leave immediately. He said this with full of energy, but the people of the Paladin Order over there were furious. What's going on? This guy killed several masters here just to take away a woman? Or that barbarian sister? She is more than 1.9 meters tall, almost 2 meters tall, with well-developed muscles all over her body, and her arms are thicker than the average person's thighs. She doesn't wear heavy metal armor and only wears the simplest barbarian coarse cloth and rags. She is at least more than 300 pounds of female warrior. I remember that her overall strength is stronger than the smiling man or the female barbarian driver before, but she is definitely weaker than the werewolf Joshua. The lost one in front of him actually came to ask for her? If you want her, give it to him. If you give it to him, at least the three will not die, right? 1 for 3, how valuable is this deal? For a while, most people in the Paladin Order camp felt that the current situation was really meaningless. Why? Why bother? As if she sensed the people around her were unsettled, Akara had no time to speak, but the resurrected Austin on her right snorted angrily. Your Excellency is talking lightly. If that's the case, the day before yesterday we went to you and asked you to hand over a person, why didn't you hand him over, but instead launched a surprise attack on us? What's going on here? Is it possible that you can only ask for someone, but we can't do the same thing? Do you think that Rogue Town is easy to bully? Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Aichiji. Chapter 265. After the speech, the previously wavering members of the cult were immediately aroused to a common hatred of the enemy. They swept away their previous negativity and turned to stare at Ruger fiercely with fighting spirit. Good guy, Ruger thought. This paladin is indeed the champion chosen by the cunning demon god. He can speak like the king of lies and turn soap into white. With 2 or 3 sentences, he mobilized the emotions of his subordinates to work together. However, Ruger didn't care much. After all, he didn't expect to achieve his goal with just his mouth from the beginning when he came here today. Of course, he wouldn't completely not use his mouth. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. You mean the 2 days ago? You think these two things are the same, right? Then I will help you explain why the two things are completely different. First of all, the person you are facing is wrong. I came here today to save Minerva. I know that she was kidnapped by your Paladin Order. So I clearly asked your people to convey my purpose to you, and we will talk directly. And that day, you relied on spy intelligence to ambush on the road that others must pass. You didn't say hello to me, you didn't send anyone to notify me, and you didn't even consider us to exist at the beginning of the action. Later, I can only help you correct your attitude so that you can realize that we exist. You can't understand anything else, right? So, if I want someone, I will talk to you face to face. You the kidnapper dared not face me. This is the first difference. Second, I still want to remind you not to forget the pain after the wound has healed. Don't you remember? When you were angry and attacked my territory, how I taught you a lesson with artillery. Last time, you attacked and I defended, and my goal was to protect my home. So whether you flee or retreat, leave my territory, even if my purpose of protection is achieved, I will let you run back directly. But now, I am the attacker and you are the defender. Do you understand what this means? This means that unless I achieve my goal, once the war begins, my artillery will not stop. And your people have nowhere to retreat. Could it be that you are still planning to abandon the city and escape? This is the second difference. When Ruger said this, it was already a naked threat. However, after such an obvious threat, the people of the Paladin Order did not continue to unite and fight with high morale. Instead, they turned their previous indignation and turned pale and trembled. Before, Austin's words inspired their positive emotions, but Ruger's casual words brought them directly back to the battlefield of the previous extremely failed offensive war. The fear of being matched by Ruger's cannons and machine guns was still in front of them. Looking at the mess on the battlefield and the corpses being carried back by several people, how could they not be afraid? They knew that the fierce god on the opposite side had been holding back. If he wanted, I'm afraid at least half of the people present would die. If he was really a monster that was mortal enemies with Nephilim, it would be fine, but he was just a human being, at most a lost stranger. The battle with him could be completely avoided. In this case, who would be willing to give up their lives to fight a meaningless and avoidable battle? The morale of the Paladin Order was deflated like a balloon that had been deflated. Austin was about to respond when he saw that things were not going well, but Ruger immediately turned up the volume of the loudspeaker to the maximum. Third. You went to rob and kidnap people that day. I came to save people today. You know why you kidnapped others. You can imagine how far you can go if you let others die for your own selfishness. It's simple here for me, just to save people. You also know how far I can go to save people. The above 3 points are completely different between you and me. From the way of doing things to the strength of the enemy and us to the purpose of the action, they are all different. The firmness of our hearts is also very different. If you have a little sympathy for your subordinates, let them go quickly, so as not to hurt others. Well, this is really a murder. Not only did he scold Austin, he also played a divisive trick to sow discord between him and his subordinates. If other time travelers came to watch the battle, they would not be able to tell who was the cunning demon god's man. God has mercy on me, this is what I have learned from arguing too much online. The cunning demon god doesn't know, but it has something to do with Xianch. You are so flattering and ridiculous. You just said one thing openly, you just want to use force to force us to obey your orders. I tell you, don't even think about it. We believe in the holy light and pursue the truth, and we will never succumb to your force. In the face of oppression, we will fight to the last man and never surrender. Austin shouted indignantly. If it was before Ruger spoke, this wonderful speech would probably get a full house of applause. The warriors of the cult were in high spirits, and with a full-scale attack, they could really turn the tide. After all, there were dozens of people here and only one car over there. But after Ruger's mental attack, although Austin's words were not without effect, at most they could only barely lift his teammates out of their negative emotions. If he wanted to inspire morale and take advantage of the situation, forget it. After listening to him, Ruger looked at the faces of those people on the city wall, narrowed his eyes and asked, "Do you mean that there is no room for negotiation? Then, let's do it." He deliberately added emphasis to the word "do it," causing Anya in the front cockpit to tremble and start the car. As a result, at the same time, everyone on the city wall was also shocked. Several people with weaker mentalities even took 2 steps back, fearing that Ruger would casually fire a high-explosive bomb and kill them instantly. "Mr. Ruger, let's talk it over." Akara, who had been silent after Austin spoke, realized that things were going to get worse, and hurriedly spoke. After Ruger asked Anya to stop, He immediately stood up straight again, with an attitude of listening attentively. Seeing him like this, Akara was somewhat relieved and continued. Mr. Lu, there is one thing you may not have understood. Minerva is different from you. You have never been from Rogue Town and have never joined Rogue Town. Tia and even Anya who left with you can also be considered to have left here. But Minerva is not. She has been a Rogue Town person from beginning to end. Although the methods may need to be improved, it is legitimate and legal for the law enforcers of the cult to bring her back to Rogue Town. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 266. On the contrary, it's you, Akara changed his subject, now you are attacking Rogue Town in the name of rescuing her. This is unfair. What you do will only make Minerva's situation even more disadvantageous. If you really do her best, you should evacuate immediately and don't add any more guilt to her. While Luge listened, he clapped his hands and praised the old monk in his heart. He said in his heart that she was worthy of being an old leader who had been the highest cultivator all her life, and she hit the point in just 2 or 3 sentences. On the one hand, he denied Ruger's accusations against Werewolf Joshua and others as spies and kidnappers, and on the other hand, he used Minerva's condition to persuade, threaten, him to stop. As for saying anything illegal, it doesn't matter to him at all. The first time he entered Rogue Town, he robbed the execution ground. The legal jurisprudence of Rogue Town? He is already a tool used by the religious group to dress up and bully others, so why would Luger care? Akala's words seemed to be reasoning, but they actually hinted that Luge should consider Minerva's feelings for Rogue Town. Asking Luger to respect the laws of Rogue Town actually means asking him to respect Minerva's feelings for Rogue Town. If she really wanted to leave Rogue Town, when Tia left with others, why did she only help Tia in the name of a friend and teammate instead of joining Rogue's second shelter herself? That showed that deep down in her heart, Minerva did not firmly choose to leave like Tia did. She has this attitude, so Rogue Town is qualified and able to take care of her. Akala also has this ability to persuade, threaten, Luger. But, is Luger the one who takes advantage of this threat? Apparently not. He raised his right hand and stretched out 2 fingers and said, 2 questions. First, you were implying just now that Minerva was arrested and returned to Rogue Town by the people of the cult because of what crime she committed. So, what is her crime? Second, if you want to persuade me to consider her feelings, your best way is to ask her to come out and tell me herself. As long as she tells me in person that she is willing to stay and that everything she has experienced is of her own free will, I will completely respect her wishes and leave immediately. Well, don't use mind control or other means on her. I can see it, and you know I can see it. After speaking, Luge stretched out his hand and waved forward, signaling Akara to answer. Could Minerva be legally taken away by someone for some reason? Impossible. Not to mention that there are almost no similar provisions in the laws of Rogue Town. Even the law enforcer's way of doing things is not serious and can be written in the laws. What's more, Minerva is on the front line. Although it is during the truce, she is still nominally a mercenary belonging to Rogue's army. The law enforcers in Rogue Town have no law enforcement authority over her. Even if she had any behavior that violated the law, it should be interrogated by the chief officer of Rogue's frontline troops, and Sarah would organize a military court for trial. Relying on spies to deceive Sarah and take the opportunity to kidnap people is a complete crime of kidnapping. Therefore, when Ruga said this, even Akara could not answer immediately and kept thinking. Akara's red-faced man, who knows how to move with emotion and reason, is temporarily mute. Over there, the white-faced Austin, who relies on mobilizing fighting spirit to suppress others, can only stand up quickly. You are mistaken. She is not here because of guilt, but because she is involved in a major matter related to the life and death of Rogtown, and she was brought back to assist in the investigation. It is related to the secrets of Rogtown. The details are not disclosed to you, an outsider. You just need to know that bringing her back is in compliance with the charter of Rogtown. It's not the turn of an outsider to dictate. If you use force to suppress others, you are trying to threaten the safety of our Rogtown with brute force. Every one of us Rogtown citizens have the obligation to stand up and fight back against your atrocities. Defeat you, the invader. Oops, this tone is worthy of that of a paladin captain. Luodu was happy when he heard what he said, thinking that this guy really regarded the Holy Knights Order as the royal guards of Luodu. This way of acting, this tone of voice, really makes him look like a commander of the Imperial Guard. To put it into a modern context, isn't this the Patriot Bill of a certain country? As long as they are suspected of being related to the KB organization, or suspected of endangering the security of a certain country, they can follow, eavesdrop, arrest and interrogate at will, avoiding their country's seemingly various laws that restrict official violence. Well, it's both legitimate and proper, a proper CIA behavior. So isn't this what Austin is talking about, the Rogtown version of the Lover's Bill? However, Ruger has more words to deal with this rhetoric. To assist in the investigation, you need to deceive the frontline military commander, right? Involved in a major matter that affects the life and death of Rogtown, right? Well, plus your previous actions at my place and the defense change in Rogtown, you can just say forget it. You want to deal with the Rog troops on the front line, don't you? Haha, those crimes and the like, just make up a list and use it. Anyway, you can write and change the laws of Rogtown as you like. You can just make some up now. It's just that I have to remind other people in Rogtown. Today the Holy Knight Order dares to use this method to deal with Rog and Minerva. They will still use this trick on any of you tomorrow. As long as you have something in your hands that they like, or you know something they don't want others to know. Now you think you will never get anything they like in your lifetime, so you let them use this method to deal with Rogue. But don't forget, you are all Nephilim, you have unlimited potential. Tomorrow is long, and it's not certain what will happen. Another set of provocations. But the strength is a little bit weaker. If Sarah and the Rogue Army were listening at the same time, the effect would definitely be much better than it is now. Ruger sighed with regret. Although the expressions of the Rogue guards on the wall have changed, they have been controlled by the cult. Even if they win their hearts, it will be useless for the current battle. At this point, both sides have said what they should say. The cult is determined not to release people, and Ruger must rescue people. After the verbal attack, it's time to move hands and feet. Ruger was still hesitating whether to use the G28 in his hand or the KWK-40L/48 below to fire the first shot, and was a little slow. Austin, on the other side, took the lead and raised a large shield to protect Akara, while shouting "Bug Cannon, ready!" Bug Cannon? Ruger was still wondering what this strange name was, and the members of the cult on the wall over there all made way for the companions in the back row to push the thing out. Seeing the strange cylindrical object supported by a wooden wheel frame, Ruger's mouth immediately opened up. He was quite familiar with that thing. If you don't consider the obviously newly made wooden bracket and wheels, the main body of the thing is clearly an old World War II cannon. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 267. Luodu hurriedly scanned the dozens of cannons on the city wall, feeling even more certain. Google search reading. Those things are the towed anti-tank guns used by the Zoo during World War II. 50mm caliber Pak 38, 75mm caliber Pak 40 and so on. Well, there is actually a lightweight version with a 37mm caliber. That thing's caliber is so small, its charge is so small, and it's an anti-tank gun. Who can it hit? Just these guys on the city wall, if they come together to fire a salvo, they may not be able to do anything to the frontal armor of Ruger's little bear assault gun. Not to mention the 7 centimeters little guy. But, how come these guys who looked down upon the weapons of the Lost suddenly started using cannons? Moreover, where did their cannons come from? Could it be that there are other ruins of the Lost here, an old secret base from the Second World War? The kind that the head of state expects to make a comeback? Wait, that's not right? If that's the case, why would these guys replace the gun mount with a wooden one that's weaker and easier to damage? Unless, these guns originally had only the gun body and no gun mount. Is there such a cannon in this world? Really? Ruger also saw it with his own eyes. Just a few kilometers east of Rogtown, he ran into the mysterious cave that he couldn't come out for a long time when he first arrived in this world. There is a kind of mysterious biological weapon called the grasshopper cannon. On their insect body, there are these old-fashioned anti-tank cannons with only the gun body left. Okay. Ruger understood now. The sentimental guys have already provoked Wei Mei themselves. You suffered a loss from me and knew the benefits of artillery, so you rushed out these semi-finished products overnight. Hoo-hoo, I'm afraid I haven't even tried it. He looked at the wooden gun mounts that were not strong enough and the jerky gunners, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. This is interesting. Then he shouted loudly to the other side of the city wall, "Where did you get these cannons? That's not fair. You have so many cannons, I only have one." Austin didn't see his joking face over there. Hearing the voice, he thought he was really scared, so he couldn't help but shout proudly, "Get ready. Fire." Austin gave an order. After the gunners adjusted the steering gear of the height machine, they immediately pulled the firing lever next to them. Boom! More than a dozen old World War II cannons of different sizes were fired at the same time. I really don't know how to describe the battle. To say it wasn't scary, a salvo of more than a dozen guns, still old World War II guns that had not been smoke exhausted, was comparable to a large caliber howitzer in terms of the effect of gunfire and smoke. It can be said that it is scary. The distance between the two sides is several hundred meters, and those guys are all novices. I don't know who is a half-hearted person who put the steering wheel on the wooden frame. Not even one of these guns could hit the Ruger, let alone penetrate the armor of the Ruger tank. The only thing that made him feel a little regretful was that the wooden frame fell apart in one shot, which he imagined did not happen. In fact, he had seen that each cannon was not so much placed on a wooden frame as it was held by at least 2 and at most 4 Nephilim. It turns out they used Superman as a human rack. The magical world is so convenient. Luger smashed his mouth and sighed with some meaning. However, he didn't wait for the other side to reload and try again. Instead, he smiled and shouted to Austin, "You have fought, right? Then, it's your turn." After saying that, he didn't go back to the gun cabin. He just reached back and pulled towards the gunner's console. Immediately afterwards, smoke screen grenades on the racks on the left and right sides of the turret were fired out one after another, blasting out thick black smoke screens, covering the area of 100 meters around the little bear assault gun in darkness. Seeing him doing this again, Austin's face, which had already poked his head out from behind the turtle shell-like shield, could not help but change, and he immediately shouted to the people around him, "Be alert, pay attention to defense." However, nothing happened. Luger used smoke bombs to disperse a large area of black smoke, but did nothing. It wasn't until the smoke screens gradually faded and dispersed under the breeze that the paladins on the city wall understood what he had done, and they couldn't help but gasp. I saw 8 more artillery pieces appearing out of thin air around the chariot. Moreover, the appearance of the cannon is very similar to the thickest and longest one on the paladin side. The difference is that the paladin only has the gun body and the gun mount is homemade. On the Ruger side, it is a complete set of original metal products. This is really a case of comparing people to death, and comparing goods with goods has to be thrown away. Do the paladins know how much energy and materials they spent to obtain these cannons, especially the cannonballs? That's it, what I got back was defective. The guy opposite is so good, he casually used his full metal alchemy to create a complete version of the 8 gates. This is not a cannon. This is clearly hitting the paladins in the face. Seeing that each of the paladins looked uglier than the last, Luodu smiled even more happily. Hey, it's not polite to come back and not reciprocate. My 8 guns are also Pak 40 anti-tank guns with a caliber of 5 cm and 46 times the caliber, just like yours. Then, take a look. He shouted one last time, snapping his fingers several times with his hands. With each sound, a shell was fired. The left and right hands fired 8 times in succession, and 8 shrapnel shells with delayed fuses adjusted in advance flew out in succession. They did not rush towards Austin, but scattered to attack the anti-tank guns on both sides of him. These Pak 40s are undoubtedly the upgraded version of the telekinetic remote-controlled chain guns that Ruger once used. The guns he used before have been recycled into raw materials to make room for the massive tanks seized from the Bloody Countess. Now these are all made by him again with those raw materials to cooperate with the Bear assault gun. So they are all 46 caliber 75mm guns. The reason for using this is to be compatible with the main gun ammunition of the Bear assault gun. The overall structure of the Bear assault gun is basically a replica of the Type 4 Tank H of the late Cold War technology. So that gun is roughly the 75mm caliber 48 caliber KWK-40 tank gun of the Type 4 Tank H. As we all know, KWK-40 is developed from Pak 40. Although the problem of the universality of the Zeus ammunition is very puzzling, it does not affect Ruger. He made his own cannons and ammunition, so it is not a problem to use them universally. More importantly, in this way, the special ammunition he made for the main gun of the Bear assault cannon will have new uses. After he sold the Bear assault cannon to Sarah, his special ammunition that only he could use would not become a display souvenir. Then why not increase the caliber? Make a more powerful towed cannon or a howitzer. First, he has all the raw materials for this kind of cannon, which can save costs. Second, this thing is enough. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 268. What's more, when he used telekinesis to perform chain fire or even salvo fire. A single cannon was not powerful enough, and a salvo of 8 cannons was enough. Google search reading. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. If it's really not enough, then just switch to Leopard 2. When playing volley fire, what you want is a massive attack with a large area of destruction. The energy density per unit area is enough. So, will it be enough this time? 8 rounds of shrapnel were fired one after another, and when they flew about 100 to 200 meters away from the city wall, the internal delay fuse burned out and the detonator was ignited to detonate the internal charge. Puff, 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 there were several small explosions from the shells. The soft shell of the shrapnel was blown apart by a small amount of explosives, revealing the steel ball pellets densely packed inside. Losing the constraints of the shell and coupled with the impact of the head-on airflow during high-speed flight, these projectiles quickly dispersed, turned into a rain, and fell straight towards the artillery on the city wall. The sound of clanging, 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 like hailstones chiseling a vat, is endless. The paladins with artillery initially wanted to rely on their shields and plate armor to resist the metal raindrops. However, after carrying it for 2 times, they realized that if they continued to carry it, not to mention their armor would be destroyed by the metal raindrops, even their skin and flesh would be sieved. As a last resort, they had to defend while retreating until they were out of the range covered by the metal rain. It was easy for them to exit, but it was difficult for the artillery. It is still unclear whether the cannon body has any hidden damage due to excessive impact. However, those wooden frames, including the main steering gear mounted on the wooden frame, as well as most of the high and low machines mounted on the gun body, with only the positioning part connected to the wooden frame, were all directly smashed to pieces by the rain of steel balls. S-Lord. Seeing the devastation on the city wall, especially the cannons that could barely be used, the adjutants of the order were shocked and could only bite the bullet and ask Austin. Austin's face is now even more ugly, his eyes are red, he is gnashing his teeth, and the red and white colors on his face alternately change, like some kind of signal light. He still didn't know what to do, but Lugger's next round of taunting had arrived. This is how the weapon of the lost should be used. Do you think that everyone uses the so-called weapons of the lost in the same way? Do you think there will be no war among the lost humans? Even if the weapons are the same, the most important thing is the person using the weapon. You can't. You can't was said in a calm and gentle tone, as if it was just a reading robot stating a monotonous matter without emotion. However, in Austin's ears, it was more harsh and unbearable than all the provocations and taunts in the world. You. Austin, with red eyes, threw away the shield in his hand for the first time, and drew out a two-handed sword from behind with his backhand. He was about to jump off the city wall, preparing to rely on his single combat skills to get back into the game. Sir, don't be impulsive. Seeing him like this, the deputy beside him quickly grabbed him and picked up the shield he threw on the ground. That person just wants to anger you, so don't be fooled. Yes, sir, it's just our first time using this kind of thing. We are definitely not as familiar with these weapons as he is. Look at his clever words and demeanor, does he dare to compete with you in sword and shield skills? He's just a lost man. I'm afraid any apprentice soldier in the town could knock him down in 2 or 3 blows. But he doesn't compete with others with fists, feet, and swords to show how powerful he is. This is how he uses his strengths and avoids his weaknesses. After I practice diligently and master the key points, wouldn't it be nice to fight him with all my strength? Why should I fall for his evil deeds just to make him feel complacent? Ruger initially listened with interest. After hearing this, he suddenly realized, could it be that the 2 deputies in Austin were not really persuading him, but were playing a double act with him? He said these words one after another, obviously he had practiced them. He rolled his eyes and sneered, that's right, listen to your subordinates and go back and practice hard for 2 years before I provoke your Uncle Luigi again, no, your Grandpa Luigi. Now, you'd better put down your weapons and raise your hands in surrender. It stands to reason that this sentence is much more insulting than the previous sentence. With Austin's previous anger, he should have immediately been furious and attacked. However, after these words were passed, instead of being angry, Austin straightened his armor, straightened his hair, and gradually regained his composure. Yeah, it's just a double act. As soon as Luge saw his posture, he knew that his anger was probably fake, and he couldn't help but curse secretly. However, he did not wait for the other side to continue their rhetoric. He raised his hands and snapped his fingers again, and the 8-pack 40s around him roared again. These towed anti-tank guns were left by him in the logistics space to be used as continuous cannons. Naturally, they would not be able to fire only one shell before having to go back and reload as before. He later made many large and small automatic loading machines, as well as many industrial robots. Even if he cannot use electronic chips, the technology he masters is enough for him to make an automatic loading device for use with towed artillery. It is nothing more than a replica of the automatic loader derived from naval guns during World War II. If it weren't for the fact that the magazine feeding method would reduce the accuracy of the artillery, he would even change these guns to magazine feeding. After experiments, he determined that this kind of thing can be used on mortars and howitzers, but it is best not to use it on anti-tank guns, so he gave up this technology line. In fact, This is easy to understand. Just like the world's high-precision medium and long-range sniper rifles are all single-shot bolt-action structures. And large-caliber anti-material rifles such as M82 are made semi-automatic because they do not require high accuracy. Its long-range accuracy is simply not as good as those bolt-action snipers. There is not much difference in the principles of guns and artillery in this regard. Installing an automatic loader on a towed artillery is something that the normal world would not do. Using towed artillery instead of self-propelled artillery is either for simplicity and reliability, or for lightweight and small size to facilitate air transportation or other means of transportation. But installing an automatic loader similar to that on a self-propelled artillery makes these two advantages no longer exist. However, Ruger's side is different. These guns are all in his logistics space. In other words, he can release them at will and take them back at will. Small size and lightweight are meaningless to him. Because of the logistics space, he didn't care about being simple, reliable, and easy to repair. Putting the damaged gun in the logistics space is equivalent to letting it recover automatically. That's why Ruger dared to do this. Even so, he couldn't break the limits of the laws of physics. There were only 6 extra rounds of ammunition on the automatic loader. No matter how much ammunition there was, the loader structure would be too big, so big that it would attract attention and be targeted by people. And if the ammunition piled together was targeted by people, the consequences can be imagined. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 269. But for Ruger, even if there are only 6 rounds of ammunition, it is enough. Google search reading. When Austin and others were playing double springs, Ruger had already remotely pressed the operation switches of each automatic loader. Driven by the motor, the lifting machine, feeding machine, and ejector rod, which can only move back and forth in a fixed position, can smoothly complete their respective tasks. Because the automatic loader is actually locked on the gun carriage, even if the gun is offset due to recoil, the ammunition can still be successfully loaded. The displacement caused by recoil will only affect the accuracy of the next shot. As for the problem of muzzle displacement, there are many solutions. Moreover, it does not affect Ruger's current use. Boom boom boom, another series of gunshots sounded, and these 8 rounds were still shrapnel shells. Because the muzzle was displaced, the landing points of the 8 rounds of ammunition this time were somewhat different from before. Most of the ammunition directly hit the city wall, not the people on the city wall. However, this is exactly the effect Ruger wanted. Because the previous round of metal rain fell from the sky and hit the top of the city wall obliquely, most of the damage was borne by the paladins. This time, most of the metal raindrops fell directly on the wall, immediately creating a large gap in the thick brick and stone city wall. From a distance, it really felt like the city wall was about to be blown down at any time. Not good, sir. If this continues, it won't be long before this wall collapses. Sir, make a decision early. The implication was that Austin should admit defeat quickly, send the man out and send the guy away quickly. At this moment, Austin was just thinking, and Akira, who had been thrown to the left by Rog's personal guard, didn't say a word. But her eyes looking at Ruggy were a little more strange. There was shock, regret, and a little relief. Although her expression was complicated, Ruggy, who had already guessed the old woman's thoughts, instantly understood her thoughts. Shocked, amazed at the power of Ruger, or the weapons of the Lost Ones. Regret, for not discovering this road earlier, not meeting this person earlier. Relieved, she knew that there was still hope for humanity, Rogue Town, and the sisters. Seeing Ruger sigh slightly, looking at her with a hint of helplessness and pity, Akira also understood the man's mind. She knew that he could understand her helplessness and her choice. Maybe one day, he would help her and give hope to those she cherished. That's good. Thinking of this, Akira, who had not expressed her true feelings for a long time, finally raised the corners of her mouth sincerely. However, it seemed that this smile from the heart would greatly consume her already limited physical strength. While trying to smile, she slowly closed her eyes. This closure was forever. Sir? Sir Akira. The rogue guard who was supporting her felt the changes in her body and couldn't help but screamed. This time, even they seemed to have broken the shackles that bound them, even their souls. The shock and grief on their faces finally made them look like normal people. Lord Akira, you have returned to eternal sleep. Ruger sighed, not knowing what to say for a moment. In fact, when he met Akira with Tia last time, Ruger knew that it would be difficult for her to hold on for too long. Whether it was potions or holy light, they could heal her physical injuries, but not her heart. The magic professions in the dark world, especially the elemental mages who train their spiritual power, are said to be able to live for hundreds of years easily. But that was the dark original world and the world of sanctuary before hell invaded and shattered the world. Now, only a few Nephilim can live past 50. Not to mention hundreds of years. Akira can hold on until now, on the one hand, because she has a very strong heart, and on the other hand, someone wants to use her skin, so they force her to live longer. Today, after seeing Ruger's methods, she knew that she didn't need to force herself to hold on, and could leave her affairs to him without worry. Her determination to hold on was immediately reduced by half. As for the rest, whether she didn't want to be controlled and used by others anymore, or the people who controlled and used her made mistakes, it was unknown. After discovering Akira's sudden death, Anya, who had been hiding in the cockpit and unwilling to come out since Austin appeared, rushed out of the cabin half shocked and half sad, and looked far away. Seeing that Rog's guards had surrounded Akira to see her off, Anya also put her hands together and silently recited the eulogy of the blind eye. After all, she was Akira's legitimate granddaughter. With a strict adoptive mother and master, it was easy to trigger the generation gap mode, allowing her to establish a different kind of relationship with Akira, the master. Although this kind of relationship is far less intense than that between blood relatives, it is precious to Anya, who lacks love. She might be the one who had the deepest feelings for Akira among Ruger's family and friends. Seeing her like this, Ruger also jumped out of the gun cabin, came to her side and supported her drooping little head, but didn't say much. Austin was also surprised to see Akira's sudden death, but there was a little more resentment and sarcasm. It seemed to say that the old guy didn't die earlier or later, but died now, which was clearly to make things difficult for him. But at the same time, it seemed like he was telling her again, do you think anything will happen if you die now? You can't change anything. And when he subconsciously looked at Ruger, he saw Anya rushing out of the cockpit, and suddenly realized that it was her who was driving the chariot. Austin's face suddenly showed a little bit of pride again. Anya, it's been a long time. Pa boom. Before Austin could finish his sentence, Lugger snapped his fingers, and an artillery gun next to him immediately fired a shell at the guy. This time, the cannonball flew much faster than the previous shrapnel, and rushed to Austin's chest in the blink of an eye, forcing him to swallow the second half of his sentence and dodge quickly. Is that what you call Anya? I want to call you Miss Anya from Mr. Luge's family. Do you understand the rules? Lugger immediately yelled. Anya, who had been silently reciting a eulogy for Akela before, couldn't help but tremble when she heard Austin's voice. To this day, she has seen the so-called paladin from other sides, so it is naturally impossible for her to still have different feelings for him as she did before. However, history is history after all, and memory is ultimately the witness of the past. She couldn't completely separate that part from herself, so she would naturally have some stress reactions. Lugger, who was holding her little head, noticed her confusion immediately, so he immediately corrected the trajectory of an artillery piece, replaced it with an armor-piercing shelling shell, and hit the guy directly. Infinite Doomsday start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 270. The shrapnel shell has a speed of only 900 plus meters per second, but this special armor-piercing shell he made specifically to deal with a single person has increased the propellant and optimized the aerodynamic shape, and the speed is as fast as 1400 meters per second. Google search reading. With the distance between the two sides being several hundred meters, it can fly over in the blink of an eye. After discovering that the man was casually pushed back by Ruger behind him, Anya, who was still mourning with her eyes closed, immediately stopped trembling, and the tense muscles of the whole person gradually relaxed. Her head was subconsciously rubbed twice on Ruger's big hand, feeling and even enjoying the fatherly care and warmth. Seeing her relax, Ruger also breathed a sigh of relief. He was a little worried when he found that Anya had been staying in the cockpit and didn't dare to come out. Now that she finally survived, he knew that from this moment on, if that guy wanted to use any PUA means to deal with Anya, he would not succeed. Austin, on the other side, thought he had a plan, and was ready to use some words to control Anya, let her turn against him, and then directly turn the tables. But he didn't expect that the guy on the opposite side just fired a cannonball and touched Anya's head casually, and all his wishful thinking was overturned. This is really intolerable. Just when he made up his mind and was ready to go all out, he heard a sudden commotion among his men around him. There was a faint voice like, "Look behind, it's the highest alert signal on the main tower." He turned his head and saw that the tower in the center of the town had already lit up and flashed a blazing white light. At the same time, there was also an alarm. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! South wall, a large number of monsters appeared in the river in the south and are attacking the city. What? Now it's not just the members of the cult on the wall, even Ruger, who was also staring at the white light of the tower not far away, was also shocked. I thought, how could there be such a coincidence? Monsters haven't appeared in the southern river for many years. Why did they suddenly appear again today? Or did they just happen to arrive in Rogue Town? Could it be? Ruger couldn't help but look at the only rogue guards on the wall who ignored the warning signal, and Akira who was surrounded by them. He thought, could it be because she died? He was surprised when he heard more exclamations from the defenders in Rogue Town. What is this? I've never seen a monster like this. Why do I feel a little similar to the ghosts in the ruins of the Lost? What? Is it a ghost? Ruger couldn't sit still this time, and hurriedly patted Anya's shoulder and whispered, "I'll go over and take a look first." He meant that Anya and Xiaoxiang should stay here and not disturb the little wizard's memorial ceremony for his grandmother. As for himself, he could wear the Iron Man armor and act as a Superman. However, just as he was about to withdraw his hand and jump off the car, Anya grabbed him. Although Anya didn't say anything, her bright and determined eyes instantly expressed her persistence. She would not give up her duties. Now she is Ruger's driver, so she must do her job as a driver. Okay, let's go to the river. Ruger nodded immediately, turned around and went back to the gun cabin. As a result, before the two of them drove far south, they saw the real monster floating on the river and attacking the southern wall of Rogue Town. The front row had already rushed from the water to the bottom of the wall, waving huge claws to attack the masonry of the wall. It was a kind of big crab with one claw super large and one claw small. The main body of these things is about the size of a wash basin, but the extra large claw is enough to catch up with a one-handed knife. Behind them, there was a saw-blade flying fish of similar size that rushed out of the water and glided to attack. These monsters, which look like enlarged flying fish, all have tough sawtooth fins. Their attack method is to jump out of the water, glide in an arc trajectory, and use sawtooth fins to attack the guards on the city wall. If these two types are more like cannon fodder, then the third type can definitely be called the main force. They are octopuses as big as buffaloes, with 8 soft claws with dense suction cups clinging to something, holding on very steadily. Under their eyes, there is a long cannon. Just by looking at the appearance, Ruger recognized at a glance that they were also old tank guns from the World War II era. And these octopus guns in the back row of the river used their special structure to adjust the muzzle and blasted grenades onto the city wall. However, although the caliber of the main guns of these octopus guns is not small, at least more than 0 centimeters, the power of their grenades is far worse than that of Ruger's grenades. The damage caused by the explosion on the city wall is even worse than the shrapnel that Ruger just used. Although Ruger added materials to his shells, he knew that they were much more powerful than the original shells, but not so much more powerful. There is only one explanation for this situation, that is, the ammunition of the octopus cannons is even less powerful than the original ammunition, and much worse. If the original ammunition is 100 points, then half of Ruger's special ammunition is between 120–150 points according to his needs. And it is not easy for one of the octopus cannons to reach 60 points. Could it be that water has entered and damped? Ruger was wondering when he heard the guards in Rogtown exclaim again. No, not good. Underground, underground, the ghosts are coming out from underground. The temple. Hurry, they are rushing to the temple. The so-called temple is the military camp-style building complex of the Paladin Order in the center of Rogtown. They are like a monastery, calling themselves an independent courtyard, separated from other buildings. The center is also a church-like hall, called the Holy Light Hall, that is, the temple. As a result of this invisibility, the entire independent courtyard is also named the temple. So now the paladins of the order often call themselves the Templar Knights. The original meaning was the high-level knights who were allowed to enter the main hall, and it gradually became generalized. Simply put, the temple is the base camp of the Paladin Order. It was heard that not only did the ghost army that drilled out of the ground appear in Rogtown, but they also headed straight for the Paladin Temple with a clear goal. The paladins who were supporting along the city wall to the south could no longer remain calm, and they all looked at Austin, who had been staring at Ruger. "Sir? Sir?" Hearing his deputy calling him again, Austin stared at Ruger fiercely for a while, and finally waved his hand and pointed directly at the center of the town and said, "Let's go back to the temple." "Yes." Hearing him give this order, the paladins who had been in low morale before exhaled the pent-up air in their hearts and responded in unison. As for what to do with Ruger outside, no one was so ignorant to ask. What is there to ask? You can't beat him, and you can't stop him. The key is that he didn't come here to burn, kill, and plunder, but just to save people. In this situation, he can do whatever he wants.